For more on this, tensions in the Middle East, we're joined by Dr. H A Hellyer, Senior Associate Fellow of the Royal United Services Institute for Defence. He's also a former advisor to the UK government and joins us live from Cairo. Thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Hellyer. Now, the question all this hour has been, will the US add its weight directly to Israel's campaign on Iran, given there are lots of repercussions that could arise from a move like that? But would that change what's happening in Iran and Israel materially enough to justify this kind of support from Washington?
Well, Sue, thank you very much for having me on the program. It's always a pleasure to be on CNA. So I think that the reality is that in the event that the United States involves itself in the war between Israel and Iran, it would be a massive escalation, of course, on the side of the United States. The Iranians would likely carry through, I think, on their threats to engage in reprisals against American assets within the region. And of course, there are many, because the Americans have different military assets stationed in the region. I also think that it would be a move that would not really help de-escalate the situation. On the contrary, I think it would escalate the situation further. The involvement of the United States would probably be expressed in the usage of these, quote unquote, bunkbuster bombs in order to take out the nuclear program facilities that are buried deep within a mountain within Iran that the Israelis cannot get
Dr. Hellyer, but at this point, sorry for cutting in, but it's acknowledged even now that even if we have these bunker-busting bombs put to action and they achieve what they set out to achieve, we're looking at setting back a nuclear weapons program, assuming there is one, by about a year.
Oh, I'm not advocating that this would be a smart course of action. On the contrary, I think this would be quite a bad course of action. I think it would mean that tensions in the region would skyrocket even further. And I think it's also important for your viewers to recognize the framing here is very important. Iran was at the negotiation table with the United States a week ago. It wasn't that the Iranians were not willing to negotiate. The Iranians are a very disreputable regime. They've been the cause of a great deal of suffering within the region. But what you've seen over the past 20 months is the state of Israel carry out a horrific war on Gaza. You've seen them invade and occupy parts of Lebanon. You've seen them expand their occupation in Syria. In fact, over the last few days, there have been multiple strikes on Syrian territory when there was nothing happening from Syria against Israel, and now on Iran. So the region looks at the current state of affairs as being one where there's an incredible vigilante action at play, i.e. carried out by the Israelis, and the United States is empowering that sense of impunity. So I don't think that there's any sympathy for the Iranian regime, and I would be quite opposed to there being such sympathy. But we're talking about international law. We're talking about regional security. We're talking about having some sort of stability in the region. And all of this is incredibly reckless and destabilizing.
So in other words, what we need to see to end at least this particular conflict would be not just a kinetic force taking out someone's nuclear weapons, but a very big political component being exercised by certainly the United States.
So the United States head of intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, made it very clear that there not only was there no nuclear weapon, but that it was quite a way off before that would be possible. The IAEA made the same assessment. In fact, pretty much everybody around the world, with the exception of the Israelis, has no doubt that there isn't evidence to suggest that they're, quote unquote, an imminent threat of having a nuclear bomb or a nuclear weapon.
But the Israeli position would be...
I remind...
Pardon me,
Sorry,
would
go
be
ahead.
whether or not Iran is quite there yet on its nuclear weapons program. It certainly has the intention, publicly expressed, to eradicate a state in the Middle East. As long as it wants to, the moment it can in fact do so, Israel would be at risk. So it's acting preemptively. That might be the Israeli position.
So I think the Israeli position is that the Iranian regime is a very bad regime that says very bad things and does bad things. And I don't think that that's in question. It is a bad regime and it does bad things. But if we're talking about nuclear weapons and the use of weaponry against its neighbors, then the state of Israel has a multitude of nuclear weapons. This is very common knowledge. Nobody can doubt it. And has carried out attacks multiple times, not simply in recent history, but over the course of many decades on its neighbors. And in just the past 20 months, as I said, they've bombed several of their neighbors. They've occupied even more territory. Their prime minister is has been indicted for war crimes at the International Criminal Court, and the state of Israel is in the dock against accusations of genocide at the International Court of Justice. So I think we have to be very careful here. It's not that we need to take sides about, what's a good regime or not a good regime. It's about where are we going to go from here. And if we're talking about rhetoric, of course, the rhetoric from Iran is very bad. And it's not just bad on the Israelis. This is bad about many countries. The Israelis have also engaged in really awful rhetoric and have actually carried it out, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's in Syria, and now talking about regime change in Iran, and the defense minister saying very clearly that one of the war aims of this particular war was to end the existence of the supreme leader. Okay, I'm not a fan of the supreme leader, but we're in 2025. International law should mean something, and if it doesn't, then we revert to the law of the jungle. And unfortunately, I think that's where we dangerously are, with the active support, unfortunately, of many powers in the West that really should know better than to allow this sort of state of affairs to continue and persist, because it will mean repercussions for all of us, not just for this particular conflict, if we all return to the law of the jungle.
Oh, thanks for that, Dr. H A Hellyer, Senior Associate Fellow of the Royal United Services Institute for Defense. He joined us from Cairo.